Prelude. This publication outlines the difficulties connected with the closure of the Bierton Baptist Chapel, where the trust deed and title to the chapel was not registered with HM Land Registry. The problem arose when the trustees wished to dispose of the chapel after the last worship service was held at the closure of the chapel on the 22nd of December 2002. It was assumed that there was no lawful person to take on the responsibility of the chapel as sole trustee. The trust deed states how trustees are to be elected and was recovered from a deceased member of the church who was the secretary at the time, who had died and was lodged with her solicitors and recovered sometime after the year ending 2002. A full account is published in Let Christian Men Be Men by David Clark. The Bierton Chapel belonged to the church called the Society of Strict and Particular Baptists, which was formed in 1831, and the chapel was closed for worship on the 22nd of December 2002, and its entitlement to membership and rules are recorded in the title deed and indenture of the same date. Mr. David Clark was received as a member of the Bierton Church in 1976, and the church became a Gospel Standard listed cause on the 16th of January 1981. An account of his call by grace, which took place on the 16th of January 1970, is told in his book Converted on LSD Trip, and now republished under the title Bierton Strict and Particular Baptists by David Clark. Mr. Clark was appointed secretary and dealt with the various matters of the church that held to traditional rules related to church membership as expressed in the Gospel Standard Rules of Conduct. Mr. Clark was called by the Lord and sent by the church to preach the gospel in 1982 and preached in many Gospel Standard churches in the UK until July 1984. Mr. Clark seceded from the Bierton Church in 1984 over matters of conscience, as the church had turned aside from teaching particular redemption and allowed one of its male members to teach general redemption, which was contrary to the church's articles of religion, as expressed in the trust deed, the male member being Mr. King and also a trustee of the chapel. On withdrawing from the church, Mr. Clark wrote a full account of his withdrawal in his book The Bierton Crisis 1984 and gave copies to the lawful elected trustees and to all concerned. The trustees were responsible for ensuring the church continued to worship God in the chapel according to the terms and doctrines as expressed in the trust deed. It was Mr. Clark's complaint that the church had failed to honour their commitment to continue to maintain the doctrine of particular redemption as clearly specified in their trust deed. Mr. Clark remained an honourable member of the church, as his membership was not terminated by the church as they wanted him to return. This was in accordance with their strict rules related to traditional church membership of strict Baptist churches, something which the Association of Grace Baptist Churches seemed to be ignorant of. Mr. Clark continued his call to preach, and in the year 2001 went on mission work to the Philippines, teaching and preaching the gospel to many prison inmates in New Bilibid Prison in Muntinlupa City and other prisons. Mr. Clark was the director of this mission called Trojan Horse International Mission to the Philippines. William Ola Pollock was appointed by Trojan Horse International on his release from New Bilibid Prison in August 2002 as a sent minister to preach the gospel to Baguio City and Benguet district jails in the Philippines. This work of William Ola Pollock is recorded in his book telling his testimony entitled Called from Darkness to His Marvellous Light by William Ola Pollock. On Mr. Clark's return to the UK in 2003, he learned all the former members of the Bierton Church had died, and he was encouraged by the former overseer of the church, Mr. Paul Crane, to return and reopen the Bierton Chapel. And he learned that the Association of Grace Baptist Churches had taken on the responsibility of the chapel. However, the association refused him permission to use the Bierton Chapel to continue his work as a gospel minister and refused to return the trust deed of the Bierton Chapel to him. They stated he was not a church member and that the Bierton Church was not a gospel standard cause. This booklet tells the whole story and is submitted to the Association of Grace Baptist Churches Limited with a view for them to put matters right in order for Mr. Clark to continue functioning as a member of the Bierton Strict and Particular Baptist Church, for which he has done so to this day, not only in the UK but abroad and in the Philippines, and now a branch to Pakistan.